The stars were quiet that morning. Admiral Helena Drake stood on the bridge of the UNS Mercy's Light, her hands folded behind her back, eyes fixed on the view before her. The planet Virelia hung in the dark, its clouds white and gentle, the blue oceans glimmering under sunlight. It was a peaceful world, a young colony filled with artists, scientists, and children. No armies, no fleets, just people who had come to build something new. Helena had seen hundreds of such worlds over her long career, places that reminded her what humanity had fought for, what they had bled for. "Status?" she asked quietly. "Convoy holding position in orbit," her second-in-command replied. "Cargo ships are unloading supplies, no sign of activity from the Zathar sector." Helena nodded. "Good, let's finish and head home." Home, the word felt strange on her tongue. After years of patrols, peacekeeping missions, and fragile truces, home was not a place anymore. It was a dream. Humanity had not fought a true war in centuries. They had become the galaxy's mediators, the ones who stepped between enemies and made them talk instead of fight. They were called Peacekeepers, and the galaxy had come to rely on them. But peace, she had learned long ago, is a blade with two edges. Hours later, as Virelia's sun dipped behind its crescent horizon, the alarms began to scream. "Multiple warp signatures," the comms officer shouted. 6, no, 12, 20. The stars erupted. Dozens of Zathar warships tore into real space, engines glowing like the eyes of predators. They came in silence, with weapons already armed. "Shields up, get those transports out of orbit," Helena barked, her voice cut through the panic. "Evasive formation Delta 2. But it was too late. The first plasma volley hit the nearest civilian ship. A bright blue flame swallowed it whole. The ship cracked apart, spilling bodies and wreckage into the void. The screams came seconds later through the comms, hundreds of voices, terrified and dying. Helena's stomach turned to ice. "Return fire," she shouted. The Mercy's light spun, its railguns roaring, slicing through one of the enemy destroyers. For a moment, hope flickered, but then another wave arrived, hundreds more. It wasn't a skirmish, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a massacre. Down on the planet, the sky burned. Civilians watched in horror as streaks of fire crossed the heavens. Pieces of shattered ships rained down, glowing red-hot. Cities lost power as shockwaves rippled through the atmosphere. A mother held her child and whispered that the humans would protect them, that the peacekeepers never failed. But the truth was, even the peacekeepers had limits. On the bridge, smoke filled the air. "Engineering is gone," someone yelled. "Deck 5 is venting atmosphere." Helm not responding. Helena gritted her teeth. "Get me a link to command." Static, then a faint voice. "Admiral Drake, this is Fleet Command. What is happening out there?" Helena stared at the burning debris on the screen. "They've attacked a relief fleet. Civilians, they're wiping them out." There was a pause. Then, "Do not retaliate beyond defense protocols. We cannot risk escalation." Helena closed her eyes. "They're killing children." "Admiral," the voice replied, calm and detached. "We must maintain peace. Hold your position. Reinforcements will arrive." The line went dead. She stood there for a moment, the firelight flickering across her face. Then she whispered, "Peace is dead." The Zathar fleet cut through the humans like wolves through sheep. They didn't want prisoners. They didn't want negotiations. They wanted to send a message. The message was simple: the peacekeepers are weak. When the Mercy's light finally broke apart, Helena watched as her crew fled in escape pods. The planet below glowed with orbital bombardments. The Zathar weapons reduced entire cities to glass. Helena's last thought before ejecting was not of vengeance, but of disbelief. How could they do this? Humanity had saved the Zathar from extinction once. It was humanity that brokered their peace treaties, rebuilt their colonies, and shared their medicine. And now they were killing unarmed civilians. For what? The survivors drifted in silence for 3 days. The wreckage of the fleet floated in orbit, a cemetery of twisted metal and frozen bodies. The emergency channels were full of cries for help, half of them in alien tongues, all unanswered. No rescue came. The galaxy watched and waited. The Council sent condolences, of course, apologies, investigations, but none dared confront the Zathar directly. They were too powerful, too dangerous. The humans, they said, would understand. They would forgive. That was their mistake. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Footage of burning cities, civilians crying into cameras, lists of the dead scrolling endlessly across every screen. People shouted in the streets, holding up signs with one word: justice. The United Earth Directorate convened an emergency meeting. The room was dark, heavy with silence. Around the table sat admirals, ministers, and envoys from allied species. Admiral Helena Drake stood among them, alive but broken, her face lit by the flicker of holographic flames. "They murdered over 1 million civilians," she said quietly. "They didn't even declare war." The Zalran delegate, his scaled skin glinting green, shifted nervously. Surely this was a misunderstanding. The Zathar may claim the humans provoked them. Provoked them? Helena's voice rose, sharp as a blade. By feeding their starving colonies, by giving them medicine. No one spoke. She looked around the table. "We have kept the peace for 400 years. We have bled for every world in this room, and you sit here asking us to forgive." Her words hung in the air like thunder. Finally, the Earth Chancellor spoke. His voice trembled. "Admiral Drake, what do you propose?" She straightened, her eyes cold as the void. "I propose we stop pretending peace still exists." That night, a single message was sent from Earth to every human colony, station, and fleet. The Terran Accord of Peace is hereby dissolved. Article 0 is in effect. Across the stars, lights went out. Patrol fleets vanished from the edges of known space. Orbital stations stopped transmitting. Merchant convoys disappeared from trade routes. And deep beneath the surface of Luna, ancient bunkers opened for the first time in centuries. Inside, buried under layers of dust and history, slept humanity's true power, war machines built during the old days of terror. Dreadnoughts with hulls of black titanium, armored suits capable of walking through fire. The Peacekeepers had kept them hidden. Now they were awakening. Admiral Drake stood alone in the command chamber, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. One red world blinked in the Zathar sector, Vyrlia. She reached out and touched the symbol. It expanded into a field of burning wreckage and broken cities. Her hand trembled once, then steadied. "Begin Operation Dawnfare," she said. "Understood," came the reply. As the stars outside Earth's orbit began to ripple with the first warp distortions, a single thought filled her mind. They wanted to see what we are without peace. Now they will. The Galactic Council had not been this crowded in centuries. Representatives from more than 80 species filled the marble hall, their bodies shimmering in all colors and forms. Some floated in gravity fields, others coiled on metal thrones, others stood upright and rigid like living statues. All of them were watching the center podium, waiting. A low hum of voices filled the chamber. Whispers, accusations, fear. The humans had called for this emergency session after the Vyrlia massacre. The holoscreens behind the podium still showed the broken planet. Cities turned to glass, oceans boiled to mist, millions gone. For 3 days, the galaxy had waited for humanity's response. For 3 days, nothing had come. No retaliation, no message, just silence. Until now. The chamber doors opened. Admiral Helena Drake entered slowly, her black uniform gleaming under the Council's pale light. The murmur in the room faded to silence. To many, she was a symbol of humanity's peacekeeping era, calm, steady, merciful. The woman who had negotiated peace between the Vakari swarm and the Aurelian hegemony, ending a war that had lasted 2 centuries. But today, there was nothing merciful in her eyes. Behind her walked 2 human soldiers in dark armor, the old Terran emblem shining like a scar across their chests. They carried no weapons. They didn't need to. Helena stopped at the podium and looked around the room. The delegates shifted uneasily under her gaze. Her voice was quiet when she spoke, but it carried through the hall like a blade cutting through air. "You called us peacekeepers, you called us saviors, you called us mediators, but what we truly were you never understood." She let the silence sit. Some delegates squirmed. "For 400 years, she continued, we stood between your wars, we buried our dead on your worlds, we gave medicine, food, and hope. We asked for nothing in return, and when your people broke their own treaties, we forgave you, every time." Her eyes moved to the far end of the room, where the Zathar delegation sat. Their leader, the Primarch, a tall, silver-scaled creature, watched her with his lidless eyes. "But you murdered one of our worlds," she said softly. "You burned Virelia to ash." The Primarch's tongue flicked out, a small, sharp motion. "A tragic misunderstanding," he hissed. "You stationed military ships in our territory. We responded as any sovereign power would." Helena's jaw tightened. There were no weapons on those ships. He leaned forward. "Prove it." A ripple of laughter came from some of the alien benches, cold, dismissive. Helena said nothing for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat and placed a small cube on the podium. It flickered to life, projecting the last transmission from the UNS Mercy's light. The council chamber filled with screams, explosions, and fire. The delegates watched in silence as Virelia's surface turned white-hot under orbital bombardment. When it ended, the room was deathly still. Helena's voice trembled, but not with fear, with fury contained behind discipline. 1 million civilians, doctors, children, artists, you killed them, and now you laugh. The Primarch's voice was smooth as glass. "War is never clean, your kind should know that." She looked straight into his eyes. "War, you think this is war?" She turned to face the entire chamber. "No, you have never seen war. You have only seen the mercy we allowed you." The hall erupted in shouts, some in anger, some in panic. The council speaker pounded his staff. "Order, Admiral Drake, you will refrain from." Helena raised her hand. The room went silent again. "The Terran Accord of Peace is dissolved," she said. The words fell like thunder. Gasps, screams, protests. Dozens of delegates began shouting, calling her mad. The speaker's translator flickered, trying to keep up. But Helena kept speaking, her voice rising over the chaos. "Article 0 is enacted. All peacekeeping operations are suspended. All human forces recalled. The age of mercy is over." Then she stepped down from the podium and walked out. No one stopped her. Outside the council hall, human envoys waited. Some were pale, others grim. "Ma'am," one of them whispered, "the council will brand this an act of aggression. They already did," Helena said. "They just didn't say it out loud." As they walked toward their shuttle, the floor beneath them trembled slightly. Far above the city, hundreds of human diplomatic vessels were powering down their beacons. Across the galaxy, every peacekeeper fleet received the same message: return home. Do not engage. Prepare. The peacekeepers, the ones who had held the galaxy together for generations, vanished in a single day. And in the silence that followed, the rest of the galaxy began to tremble. On Earth, the skies glowed red with the reflection of ship thrusters. The old shipyards above Luna came alive for the first time in centuries. Massive cranes pulled black shapes from deep hangars, their armor scarred but strong. Ancient dreadnoughts, the titans of the old war, rose from their tombs like ghosts from another age. Men and women who had never seen combat worked side by side with veterans too old to lift rifles. Factories burned day and night. Every forge, every foundry, every orbital dock thundered with purpose. Children watched from rooftops as the stars flickered with movement. They didn't cheer. They didn't wave flags. They simply watched, silent and afraid. Because they understood something their elders had forgotten. If humanity was preparing for war, then peace had already died. The Zathar Dominions celebrated in the meantime. Their propaganda spread across the networks, declaring victory over Terran arrogance. Their Primarch appeared on every broadcast, smiling with cold pride. "The humans have always pretended to be gods of justice," he said. "Now they hide behind their walls, afraid to face us. The galaxy belongs to those with strength, not sentiment." The other species listened and said nothing. Some believed him, others prayed he was wrong. But across the void, near the Sol expanse, strange readings began to appear on scanners. Massive energy signatures, distortions in space-time, whole fleets disappearing from known space and reappearing weeks later near the edge of the galactic rim. The humans weren't hiding. They were building. In the hidden depths of Titan's command base, Admiral Helena Drake stood before a holographic star map. Every system marked in red was a wound. Every mark was a memory of loss. A voice behind her spoke softly. "You know what this means, Admiral? Once we do this, there's no going back." She didn't turn. They made sure of that. "They think we're weak." "They always have." She looked up. They forget we only kept the peace because we chose to. The officer hesitated, and now. Helena turned, her eyes hard as steel. Now we show them what happens when peacekeepers go to war. Far across the stars, in the ruins of Violia, a lone beacon still pulsed weakly beneath the ashes. A recording played over and over, a child's voice calling into the void. "Please, is anyone out there? Please help us. They're still burning." No one answered. But somewhere, deep in the dark between worlds, a human fleet turned its course toward the Zathar Dominion. The engines roared like thunder across the stars. The message was short, simple, terrifying. "For Violia." And with that, the spark was lit. The galaxy did not yet know it, but the abyss had already begun to burn. The Zathar Dominion was not afraid. They had crushed empires before, broken fleets that spanned galaxies. To them, humanity was a race of diplomats and healers, kind, patient, soft. They had seen human soldiers before, yes, but never the full weight of human war, never the wrath that slept beneath the calm. And so, when their scouts reported unusual energy readings near the Sol expanse, the Primarch laughed. "The Terrans are posturing," he said to his generals. "They will not fight, they never fight." But deep in the void, beyond the reach of their sensors, something ancient was awakening. On the far edge of Sol, in a graveyard of forgotten ships, a fleet gathered. Thousands of human vessels, old peacekeeper frigates, dreadnoughts from the first expansion, carriers rebuilt from rust and memory. They formed an endless line, hulls painted black, symbols erased. They did not carry peacekeeper crests anymore. Only one emblem remained, a single silver circle crossed by a crimson line. The mark of war. Admiral Helena Drake stood on the bridge of the UNS Valkyrie, the flagship of the reawakened Terran fleet. Her face was pale in the cold glow of tactical screens. Around her, hundreds of officers worked in silence. No one spoke of revenge. No one had to. Before her eyes floated a projection of Violia, or what was left of it. The planet was gray and dead now, wrapped in a shroud of dust. She had looked at that image every day since the massacre. Now she whispered to it, as though it could still hear her. "You will be avenged." When the first human fleet jumped into Zathar space, no warning was given. No declarations, no broadcasts. The stars simply moved. The Valkyrie emerged from warp like a ghost tearing through the fabric of space, followed by the Yamato, Glory of Dawn, Solstice Spear, and hundreds of smaller ships. Every hull glimmered with silent menace. The Zathar Border Patrol barely had time to react. "Unknown signatures, human." That was all they managed to say before the first rail rounds hit. Blue light filled the void as the Valkyrie's main gun fired, sending a tungsten slug the size of a building through a Zathar battleship. The ship folded in on itself and vanished in a burst of plasma. Seconds later, the rest of the fleet opened fire. The silence of space was replaced by thunder made of light. For the Zathar crews, it was chaos. Their ships were built for intimidation, massive, ornate, meant to terrify lesser species. Against human precision, they were slow and clumsy. Human ships darted between them, striking fast, disappearing before counterfire could land. Swarms of drones spread like metallic locusts, cutting through shields, jamming sensors, melting engines. On the Valkyrie, Captain Myra Chen watched the battle unfold. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Target the flagship, cut the head first." The tactical display flashed as torpedoes launched. The Zathar flagship tried to run, shields flaring. "They're jumping," someone shouted. "Not fast enough," Chen replied. 3 torpedoes hit, the ship imploded. A moment later, every Zathar channel went dark. The battle had lasted 17 minutes. An entire fleet gone. Word spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The humans had struck back, not in anger but with cold, terrifying precision. At first, the other species refused to believe it. How could a peaceful people destroy a war fleet so easily? But soon, the recordings arrived, images of black warships gliding through fire, of Zathar dreadnoughts splitting apart like paper. The galaxy began to whisper again. One word, one question. What are the humans? The Zathar Dominion was furious. They launched a counterattack, 1,000 ships strong, toward the human border. It was meant to crush resistance before it could spread. But humanity was waiting. The Zathar fleet emerged from warp near the abandoned world of Tyros IV, where no life signs were detected. No defenses, no ships. They thought it was a trap. They were right. Hidden inside Tyros IV's hollowed moon was the Sol Hammer, humanity's first orbital weapon of mass destruction, a relic from the forgotten wars of Earth. When the Zathar ships entered orbit, the hammer awoke. A beam of light brighter than any sun pierced the darkness. The Zathar fleet never had time to scream. The planet's crust cracked, the atmosphere boiled away. When the light faded, Tyros IV was gone, and so were the Zathar. Back on the Valkyrie, Admiral Drake stood before her officers. The war map glowed red, dozens of enemy systems. Her chief engineer, a grizzled man with oil on his uniform, spoke quietly. "We can't hold this pace forever, Admiral. We'll burn ourselves out." Drake looked at him. "We don't hold, we strike, we make them understand." He hesitated. Understand what? Her gaze was steel. That peace was a gift. The Zathar Council was in panic. They had never been defeated so quickly, so completely. Their fleets were burning, their colonies dark. In desperation, the Primarch called an emergency broadcast to the galaxy. "Humanity has turned against us all. They bring fire and ruin. They threaten every world." He slammed his clawed hand on the table. "We must unite against them." But no one answered. The other species remembered Vyrlia. They remembered the silence that followed, and in that silence fear grew. They had mocked the humans for their mercy. Now they feared the day that mercy ended. Meanwhile, across the stars, human fleets pushed deeper into enemy space. At the Battle of Zyr's Rift, a single Terran carrier faced an armada of 200 Zathar ships. The carrier's crew refused to retreat. They fought until the last missile was fired, then rammed the enemy flagship at full burn. The explosion tore a scar through space that still glowed for days. In orbit of Kersh Prime, the Yamato held against 4 enemy dreadnoughts. Its captain, wounded and bleeding, gave the final command before blackout. "Show them what Earth taught us, never kneel." The Yamato's reactors went critical, vaporizing everything within 10,000 kilometers. When the smoke cleared, the Zathar Dominion was broken. The surviving fleets scattered. The once proud empire begged for negotiations, but no human voice answered. Their transmissions went unanswered. The only thing that came back was a single message, burned into their comms in human language. "We were your peace, you chose war." On the bridge of the Valkyrie, Helena Drake stood alone, watching the wreckage drift past. She felt no joy, no victory, only silence. She thought of the faces of those who died on Vyrlia, the children, the healers, the dreamers. Peace had been her life's work. She had built it with words and faith, but the galaxy had mistaken peace for weakness. Now it understood. She turned to her officers. "Signal all fleets, prepare to withdraw. Phase 2 begins." "Phase 2, Admiral." Drake looked out at the endless stars. Her voice was calm. "We rebuild, but not for peace, for control." And in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. No longer was humanity the voice of reason, no longer the savior or the mediator. Now they were something else. Something unstoppable. Something that even the stars themselves began to fear. The fires of war spread like a storm across the galaxy. Everywhere the name humanity became a whisper, a curse, a warning. Worlds that once cheered the arrival of Peacekeeper ships now trembled when human war fleets passed through their skies. The Zathar Dominion was dying. Its proud banners burned, its fleets scattered, its people fleeing from the light of human vengeance. Yet even as their empire crumbled, the Zathar still fought, not with strength, but with desperation. And for every world they destroyed, for every innocent they slaughtered, humanity struck back 100-fold. From orbit, the Zathar home sector glowed red like a wound in the stars. Admiral Helena Drake stood on the bridge of the UNS Valkyrie, watching the burning debris drift past. The space around them was littered with wrecks, metal bones of what had once been the largest armada in the galaxy. Her officers worked quietly, their faces pale in the crimson light. None dared speak the thought that haunted them all: how far will we go? Drake didn't need to ask, she already knew. There was no turning back now. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "we're receiving another surrender request from the Harnick Confederacy. They claim neutrality. Drake's eyes flicked toward the screen. The message showed a small green-skinned alien trembling. "We didn't help the Zathar, we swear it. Please, our people." "Transmit humanitarian aid coordinates," Drake said calmly. The officer hesitated. "Aid, ma'am, not orbital strike." Drake turned her gaze like cold iron. "We destroy the guilty, we protect the helpless, that's what separates us from them." She paused, "But if they lie, then burn them." On the other side of the galaxy, human Marines fought ground battles that became legend. At the siege of Corvath Prime, 20,000 humans faced 2 million defenders. The aliens laughed when they saw the small human landing force descend through the clouds. They stopped laughing when the humans started singing. The Terran Hymn of Remembrance, a song first sung after the fall of Vyrlia, echoed through the atmosphere. It was not a song of victory. It was a song of mourning, of sorrow turned to steel. Every step the Marines took was measured, silent, unstoppable. When the battle ended, the Corvath armies were gone. The city stood empty except for a single human flag fluttering among the ashes. Reports flooded the Galactic Council, entire worlds surrendering without a fight. The K'Arta clans, once feared for their raiding fleets, sent their warlords in chains to Earth, begging for protection. The Volari Empire dismantled its fleets overnight, offering tribute to avoid Terran attention. Even the neutral races, the ones who once mocked humanity's patience, now armed themselves in terror. They built bunkers, hid fleets, and sent desperate messages across the void. "We are not your enemies, please don't come here." But humanity didn't answer. The Peacekeepers who once spoke for kindness now spoke only through silence and through fire. Deep in the ruins of the Zathar capital world, the Primarch stood in his war chamber, his silver scales dull from exhaustion. His empire was falling apart. "Report," he hissed. A frightened officer replied, "Admiral Drake's fleet is approaching the core. We cannot stop them. They bypassed our defenses as if they knew every code, every weak point." The Primarch slammed his clawed hand onto the table, denting the metal. "How do they know our defenses?" A voice answered from the shadows, "Because they built them." The Primarch turned sharply. An old hologram flickered to life, a human engineer recorded decades earlier. "For mutual peace and cooperation," the recording said, smiling. "We will upgrade your systems to ensure stability." The Primarch stared, his claws trembled. "They planned this." The officer whispered, horrified, "They planned for everything." When the Valkyrie arrived in orbit above the Zathar homeworld, no one fired. The sky was filled with drifting wrecks and silent cities. The once mighty Dominion was on its knees. Drake stood on the command deck, surrounded by her officers. The planet below was scarred, oceans turned black, cities reduced to glass. "Open channel," she said. A flicker, then the Primarch appeared on the main screen, standing in the ruins of his palace. His voice was weak but proud. "You've won, human. What now? Will you burn what's left of us?" Drake didn't answer at first. She looked at him, this creature who had ordered the deaths of 1 million innocents, and saw not a monster but something worse. A coward hiding behind pride. "No," she said finally. "You'll live, so your children will remember why they crawl." The Primarch bared his teeth. "You think yourself a god." Drake's eyes were calm. "No, but you thought we were sheep." The human fleet did not destroy the planet. Instead, they did something far more terrifying. They dismantled the orbital stations, seized every shipyard, and placed thousands of drones in orbit. No ships could leave. No messages could escape. The Zathar homeworld became a prison, alive, but never free. And above it hung the Valkyrie, its hull black as night, watching. Every Zathar child who looked at the sky would see that shadow and remember. Elsewhere in the depths of space, smaller alien factions began to tear each other apart. Old grudges reignited in fear of human retaliation. Worlds burned, alliances broke, chaos spread. And in every dark corner, the same whisper grew. "Do not make the humans angry." The galaxy had entered a new age, an age ruled not by treaties but by terror. Back on Earth, the cities were bright and silent. The people walked with pride, but also with something darker, a quiet heaviness. They had won, but at what cost? Children grew up playing with toy ships shaped like dreadnoughts. History lessons no longer taught diplomacy, but strategy. Peace, the teachers said, must be protected with strength. No one questioned it. No one dared. In the command center beneath the old Peacekeeper headquarters, Admiral Drake stood before the Council of Human Leaders. "The war is over," one of them said. "The Zathar are broken. The galaxy will think twice before crossing us again." Drake didn't smile. "Fear is not peace." "But it works," another replied. Drake looked down at the hologram of Vyrlier again, still dead, still silent. "Peace built on fear," she said softly, "is just a different kind of war." No one answered. She turned away, her reflection fading into the map of stars. That night in the solitude of her quarters, Drake recorded a message. It was short, simple, meant not for leaders, but for the generations that would come after her. "We were kind once. We offered peace to a galaxy that didn't deserve it. They mistook our kindness for weakness. They thought mercy was surrender. But mercy is not weakness. Mercy is choice. And when mercy dies, what remains is something no empire can control. Remember this, we do not fight for vengeance. We fight so no one will ever make us beg for peace again." She ended the recording and looked out at the stars. They were beautiful, cold, distant, eternal. For the first time, she wondered if humanity had become like them. Beautiful, distant, unreachable. Far across the galaxy, the last Zathar fleet drifted through the void, leaderless, broken, terrified. Their commander stared at a faint blue star in the distance, Saul, and whispered to himself, voice trembling. "They were supposed to be our peacekeepers." He closed his eyes as the engines died. "But now they are our gods of war." The galaxy had seen many wars before. Empires had risen and fallen, species had conquered, enslaved, rebuilt. But none of them, none, had ever witnessed a war like the one humanity unleashed. The Zathar Dominion was collapsing. Its worlds burned like dying suns, and its once-proud fleets were now nothing more than floating graves. But still they fought. Pride chained them where logic had already fled. They believed that if they could strike one decisive blow, if they could kill just one Terran fleet, they might still survive. So they gathered everything, every ship, every weapon, every desperate hope. They called it the Final Armada. At Zyr's Rift, the stars themselves were tearing apart. It was a place where gravity twisted and screamed, a scar left from an ancient supernova. No sane commander would fight there. But the humans chose it, because they knew the Zathar would follow. Admiral Helena Drake stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, watching the rift swirl before her. Space bent and folded in on itself like liquid glass. Even through the ship's shielding, the pressure felt alive, pressing on the soul. Her fleet, just over 100 ships, waited in perfect formation, silent. Across the void, sensors showed the enemy gathering, over 1 million Zathar vessels, filling the horizon like a swarm of steel locusts. Her second-in-command swallowed hard. "We're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Helena didn't look away from the rift. "Then it's a fair fight." The Zathar attack began with blinding light. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked across space, carving through darkness like fiery rivers. The human fleet's shields flared white, bending but not breaking. "Hold positions," Helena ordered. "Wait for the signal." Her officers obeyed without question. They had all fought too long to fear numbers anymore. On her command screen, red icons multiplied like a spreading disease. "Admiral, they're surrounding us." "I know." Helena's eyes flicked toward the rift. It pulsed faintly, like a heart beating in the dark. She whispered, "Now." The Valkyrie's engines roared. In an instant, the entire Terran fleet vanished from their positions, slipping sideways through folded space, diving straight into the rift. The Zathar commanders shouted in confusion. "They're retreating, pursue." But it wasn't retreat, it was the trap. Inside the rift, human ships danced between gravitational fractures that tore lesser ships apart. Their hulls, built from black quantum alloys, bent reality itself, gliding through impossible paths. When the Zathar followed, they entered hell. Gravity ripped at their formation. Hulls twisted like paper. Their ships collided, exploding in waves of blue fire. And from within the chaos, the Terrans struck. The Yamato led the charge, emerging from behind a collapsing star fragment, its rail batteries glowing white-hot. It fired once, just once, and a dozen enemy cruisers disintegrated. Fire at will, Helena commanded. Space turned to daylight. Human ships unleashed every weapon they had. Railguns, plasma arcs, guided singularity warheads. The rift magnified the explosions until the stars themselves seemed to die. A Zathar dreadnought tried to ram the Valkyrie. Helena didn't flinch. Lock tractor beams pull them in. The enemy ship struggled, massive engines roaring, but the Terran dreadnought held it fast, then fired all forward cannons at point blank. The explosion lit the rift like a newborn sun. Hours passed. The Zathar kept coming, throwing ship after ship into the storm. Shields at 40%, someone shouted. Reactor 3 is overloading. Enemy reinforcements inbound from the south vector. Helena's voice cut through the noise. Maintain focus, target their command core. Through the smoke and static, the enemy flagship came into view, a monstrous vessel the size of a moon, bristling with weapons. The Tyrant of Scales, her officer whispered, that's the Primarch's ship. Helena stared at it, end it. The battle between the Valkyrie and the Tyrant became legend. The two ships circled each other amid collapsing space, firing until both bled light. Every impact shook the stars. The Zathar flagship unleashed a gravity cannon, tearing chunks from the Valkyrie's hull. Half her decks went dark. Hundreds of crew were lost. But Helena stood firm, gripping the railing, eyes cold. Bring main rail online. Her weapons officer's hands shook. That'll tear the core apart. Do it. The Valkyrie's spine glowed red as the ancient weapon powered up, a weapon designed never to be used. Helena whispered, for Vyrlia. The rail fired. A spear of pure energy tore through the Tyrant's hull, slicing it in two. For a heartbeat, the massive ship hung motionless, then broke apart, vanishing into the rift. When the dust settled, the Zathar fleet was gone. The survivors fled into the dark, scattered and broken. The Valkyrie drifted in silence, its armor scorched, its engines dying. Inside, the crew moved like ghosts. Status, Helena asked quietly. 70% casualties across the fleet, her officer replied. We lost the Solstice Spear. The Yamato is crippled, but we won. Helena closed her eyes. At what cost? In the ruins of the Zathar capital, the Primarch's council lay dead. No one had survived to rebuild. Their species, once rulers of 1,000 worlds, was now shattered. When the human fleets arrived, they found only silence. Helena ordered no bombardments, no executions, just one transmission broadcast to every remaining Zathar outpost. This war is over. Your dominion is finished. You took our peace, and we took your pride. Remember that mercy was always a choice. Then the message repeated endlessly on every frequency. Back on Earth, the news arrived slowly. At first there was relief, then cheering, then quiet. For the first time in generations, there was no enemy left to fight. Helena Drake returned home to a world that looked the same but felt different. Crowds greeted her as a hero, but when she looked into their eyes, she saw something new: fear. They didn't cheer for peace, they cheered for power. And that frightened her more than any enemy ever had. One evening, she stood on the observation deck above Earth, looking at the blue planet spinning below. The stars beyond it were calm now, too calm. Her old friend, Captain Myra Chen, approached. You should rest, the war's done. Helena didn't turn. No, the fighting's done, the war never ends. Chen frowned. You think they'll rise again? Helena's voice was quiet. No, I think we will. Far across the galaxy, in the ashes of Zathar space, a single beacon blinked weakly, a distress signal from a dying world. A human probe intercepted it, analyzed it, and sent it to command. The message was simple. We surrender, please help us. Admiral Drake read it, then she gave her order. Send aid. Her officers exchanged glances. Aid after everything. Helena looked out the window, her face unreadable. Because that's who we were, and who we must try to be again. In the endless dark, the wreckage of the Tyrant of Scales drifted silently, and deep within its broken hull, a faint spark of life flickered. A single Zathar escape pod detached, vanishing into the void. The galaxy might have thought the war was over. But peace, true peace, had not yet returned. Because peace, once broken, never comes back the same. The war was over. But peace did not return. The Zathar dominion was gone, reduced to dust and whispers. The other races, the proud empires, the ancient councils, the old predators of the stars, now watched humanity in silence. Their fleets stayed close to home, their leaders spoke softly, and their eyes never turned toward Earth. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when pushed. It would never forget. Admiral Helena Drake sat alone in her office aboard the Valkyrie. The ship floated in orbit over Sol, gleaming like a dark blade against the light of the sun. It should have been a monument to victory. Instead, it felt like a tomb. The reports were endless. Planetary reconstruction, displaced refugees, surrender petitions, aid requests. The war had broken more than just armies, it had broken entire civilizations. She scrolled through another message. It was from a colony in the Outer Rim. 500,000 alien civilians had no food, no clean water, no shelter. They were Zathar survivors. Her aide waited beside her. "Orders, Admiral." Drake closed her eyes for a moment. "Send relief teams, medical units, supplies, everything they need." The aide hesitated. "They're the enemy, ma'am, the same ones who—" "Not anymore." She looked up, her voice heavy. "They were soldiers, now they're starving. We won't become what we fought." The aide nodded and left. Helena leaned back in her chair. Outside, the stars shone quietly, indifferent, eternal. Across the galaxy, the human fleet stood watch. The Peacekeeper stations were gone, replaced by black steel fortresses orbiting every major trade lane. Where once humanity's white ships had brought medicine and hope, now dark warships drifted silently, their guns always pointed outward. Other species called them the Black Suns. Silent guardians, ruthless gods. No one dared challenge them. No one dared even speak too loudly. Trade routes flourished again under their watch. Piracy disappeared. Wars ceased. The galaxy entered an era of absolute order, an order born of fear. The Galactic Council tried to meet again. The old hall was half empty, its marble pillars cracked, its banners faded. Many seats stayed vacant. The worlds they belonged to no longer existed. When the humans arrived, the room fell silent. They wore no bright uniforms, no symbols of peace. Their suits were simple, black, marked only by the silver emblem of the Terran Directorate. The speaker, a trembling Aurelian, tried to address them. "Admiral Drake, we thank you for restoring stability to the galaxy." Drake said nothing. She only watched, calm and still. The speaker continued, voice shaking. "We would like to propose a new charter, a council to ensure lasting peace, so such war never happens again." Helena looked around the chamber. "You mean a council to restrain us?" The speaker flinched. "To maintain balance." The human envoy beside her, a man named Voss, leaned forward. "Balance ended when you allowed the Zathar to slaughter our people. You had your chance to keep peace. You failed. Now we will maintain it our way." No one spoke after that. When the humans left, the council adjourned indefinitely. It would never meet again. Back on Earth, humanity celebrated. Streets were filled with flags and lights, with songs and speeches of victory. Children dressed as soldiers, waving miniature railguns made of plastic. But under the cheering, something darker lingered. There were no songs about peace, no poems about mercy, only pride, only might. Drake watched the parades from her window in the Directorate Tower. The people looked happy, but their faces were hard, eyes sharp, jaws clenched. They weren't celebrating the end of war. They were celebrating power. Her old friend, Captain Myra Chen, entered quietly. "You should be out there, the people love you." Helena shook her head. "They don't love me, they love what I represent." Chen frowned. "Strength isn't something to be ashamed of, we survived." "Yes," Drake whispered, "but what did we become?" Months passed. Reconstruction began. Human engineers rebuilt alien cities, restored power to broken colonies, and distributed food to starving worlds. But for every act of kindness, there were soldiers standing guard, silent, armed, unblinking. Some alien leaders tried to resist. They were swiftly replaced by Terran advisors. Others vanished quietly. The galaxy learned fast. Peace would continue, but only on human terms. One night aboard the Valkyrie, Admiral Drake received a message from one of the frontier fleets. It was marked urgent, unauthorized contact. She opened it. A hologram flickered to life, a recording from a Terran patrol near the edge of known space. A lone Zathar ship had appeared, its hull scarred, its engines failing. The crew had surrendered immediately, broadcasting one simple phrase across all channels. "We seek forgiveness." Drake watched the recording in silence. The ship's crew had brought no weapons, no threats. Only gifts, medical data, maps of unknown systems, and a single metal shard engraved with human letters. It read for Violia. When her officers gathered for orders, everyone expected her to order the ship destroyed. The Zathar were hated beyond measure. Many still whispered the word revenge like a prayer. But Helena stood slowly and said, "Bring them in, feed them, let them live." Her officers stared. One finally spoke. "After everything they did, why?" Helena's voice was steady. "Because if we can't forgive, then peace is truly dead." No one argued. A week later, the galaxy learned of her decision. Some called it betrayal, others called it wisdom. But among alien worlds, hope flickered again, small, fragile, uncertain. A Zathar relief colony was established under human supervision. For the first time in years, humans and Zathar worked side by side, slowly, cautiously. Children from both species learned together in rebuilt schools. Soldiers exchanged handshakes instead of fire. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Yet in the shadows, not everyone agreed. Within the Directorate, whispers spread. Some generals said Drake had grown soft, that mercy would undo everything humanity had built. They remembered how easily peace had died once before, and they feared it could happen again. A message was sent to her under a false seal. Peace cannot live without control, and control cannot live with compassion. Helena read it once, then deleted it, but the words stayed in her mind. On the night before the anniversary of Violia, she stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie once more. The stars shimmered beyond the glass. She spoke quietly to no one in particular. "We were peacekeepers once, builders, healers, and maybe one day we can be that again, but until then we guard the peace with our shadows." She turned to her reflection. It stared back, older, colder. "Because someone has to." Outside, the Valkyrie drifted silently above Earth, its guns dark, its shields dimmed. But every world knew that if humanity's peace was threatened again, those guns would wake. And the galaxy would burn all over again. Peace had returned, but it was no longer the peace of hope. It was the peace of fear. The peace of humanity. 100 years passed since the end of the war. And still, the stars feared the name of humanity. The Terran Directorate ruled the galaxy now, not through open conquest, but through silence. No fleets dared challenge them. No empire dared whisper rebellion. Peace endured, yes. But it was a peace made of shadows, and every star knew it. Admiral Helena Drake's name had become legend. Statues stood on worlds she had never seen, her face carved into stone and metal. Some called her the savior of the galaxy. Others called her the destroyer of empires. But Helena was long gone. What remained were her teachings, her recordings, her warnings, her final message stored deep within the heart of the UNS Valkyrie. Generations of admirals listened to it like scripture. Every one of them took the same oath. "We will protect the peace, by mercy or by fire." And so humanity kept watch. Across the stars, black Terran fortresses hung over every major world. Massive defense stations, silent, unmoving, like eyes staring down from heaven. Their presence kept the galaxy calm, but it was not trust that kept the peace. It was fear. Children of alien worlds grew up learning human history the way old priests once taught myths. Teachers spoke softly when they said the words, Violia, Zaire's rift, the fall of the Dominion. Every race remembered what happened when peace was broken. And none dared test it again. But in the farthest reaches of space, beyond the charted systems, something was stirring. Exploration ships had gone missing, communication arrays fell silent, entire outposts vanished without a trace. At first, the Directorate dismissed it as pirates or equipment failure. But when one of the border fleets failed to report for 7 days, an old dread began to creep back into human command. The peace was trembling. Admiral Ren Arlen was the newest commander of the Valkyrie. A descendant of one of the original Peacekeepers, he had grown up beneath the shadow of his ancestors' deeds. To him, humanity's rule was necessary, but heavy. He had studied Drake's recordings since childhood. He knew every word, every pause, and though he admired her, part of him feared what she had unleashed. Now, sitting in her old chair on the same bridge, he looked at the stars beyond the viewport and wondered if she'd be proud, or ashamed, of what peace had become. A censor officer broke the silence. "Admiral, we have something. Unknown warp signatures, massive energy output." Arlen leaned forward. "How many?" "Dozens, maybe hundreds. They're not human." The bridge went still. "Contact all nearby fleets," Arlen ordered. "Prepare for defense and get me visuals." When the images came through, the crew fell silent. The ships were unlike anything they'd ever seen, black, organic, alive. They moved like predators through water, not metal in space. Their weapons pulsed with a strange red glow. Arlen's heart sank. "That's not Zathar design." "No, sir, it's something new." A transmission followed, static at first, then a voice low and cold. "Humans, we have watched your peace, your control, your fear. You call it order, we call it weakness." The voice was neither human nor alien. It was layered, many voices speaking as one. "We are the children of the rift. You killed our creators. Now we will finish their war." Then the transmission cut out. Arlen stood slowly. "Alert all systems, full combat readiness." The Valkyrie's old engines roared to life. Once again, the ancient ship prepared for war. Within days, the galaxy fell into panic. The children of the rift attacked with terrifying speed, striking at old Zathar ruins, Terran colonies, and alien strongholds alike. Their ships tore through fleets like ghosts, phasing in and out of space. Worlds burned. And for the first time in a century, humanity bled again. The alien races looked to Earth for salvation. They begged the Directorate for protection. And the humans answered, not with words but with fleets. Thousands of ships surged from the Sol expanse. The black suns were rising again. Admiral Arlen stood at the war table, surrounded by his captains. "They're using old Zathar tech warped through the rift. We think the rift itself was alive, or at least conscious. It's creating these things." A captain whispered, "Then this isn't just another war." Arlen nodded. "No, this is the consequence of what we unleashed." He looked around at his officers. "Drake once said peace without mercy is just a different kind of war. Maybe it's time we remembered mercy." The captains exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir," one said, "mercy won't stop them." "Maybe not," Arlen replied. "But if we fight like monsters again, we'll finish what they started, turning peace into extinction." The final battle began over the world of Thane. It was humanity's oldest colony, the birthplace of the Peacekeeper order. When the children of the rift descended upon it, the sky turned crimson. Human ships met them head-on, forming a wall of steel and fire. The Valkyrie led the charge, its guns roaring like thunder. Explosions lit the void. War returned to the stars once more. Arlen's voice echoed through the fleet channel. "This is not Violia. This is not revenge. This is defense for all life. Hold the line." The Valkyrie was struck by a rift beam, half its hull melting, but still it fought. Railguns tore through enemy ships. Fighters launched from its bays like angry sparks. The children screamed through the comms, their voices merging into a single howl. "You cannot kill what was born from your fear." Arlen smiled grimly. "Watch us." He ordered the final sequence. The Valkyrie's core began to overload. The officers stared. "Sir, that'll destroy the ship." "I know," Arlen said quietly, "but it will close the rift." He looked once more at Drake's old chair. "You built this ship to protect peace. Let it end the war the same way." He gave the order. The Valkyrie dove straight into the rift, its reactor flaring white. A moment later, the stars went silent. When the light faded, the rift was gone. The children vanished with it. The galaxy was saved again, but at a terrible cost. No one knew if Arlen or his crew survived. The Valkyrie was never seen again. But every world saw the explosion, a light brighter than any sun, and knew what it meant. The humans had sacrificed their greatest weapon to save them all. And once again, the galaxy whispered the same truth. Do not awaken them, do not test them. Humanity will always return. Years later, a small colony ship traveling near Zyr's rift found something drifting among the stars. A single black fragment of hull, scorched but intact. Engraved upon it were words written in a human hand. Peace is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to choose mercy. In the end, humanity rebuilt once more. Their fleets patrolled the stars, their fortresses watched, and their voices spoke softly again. But this time, the galaxy did not see them as conquerors. They saw them as something else, keepers of balance, guardians of fire. The peace they forged now was not the peace of silence, it was the peace of choice. The galaxy still feared them, but now it also hoped. And in the darkness between stars, where echoes of old wars still lingered, the memory of the Valkyrie glowed like a promise. Humanity keeps the peace. Forever,